Hello and welcome to House to Home, a podcast by Family Policy Alliance Foundation. I'm Joseph Kohm, the Director of Public Policy at Family Policy Alliance Foundation, and I'm here as always alongside my co-host, Grace Youngson. Grace, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Joseph. I'm excited, as always, to be on with you. And today we have a particularly interesting story from our friends at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, who conducted the largest survey on the effects of the abortion pill, which some of the results are pretty shocking. Can you tell us more about this, Joseph?
Sure. So Ethics and Public Policy Center is what we would call a national allied organization with Family Policy Alliance. We're not the same organization. We're separate orgs, but we're very close allies, which is why we were really interested to see this study drop. And EPPC has done a great job marketing it and making sure the news about it gets out there. So as you said, Grace, this is the largest ever study conducted about the drug mifepristone, which people clued into the abortion issue will know. Mifepristone is about one half of what's known as the chemical abortion drug regimen. The other half is misoprostol, but mifepristone is really the engine of that drug regimen. And this is the largest ever study conducted of it. It analyzed insurance claims data from 865,727 mifepristone abortions between the years 2017 and 2023. And their findings, as you said, are truly alarming. We're going to talk about the implications of them. But to make sure everyone knows the bottom line of these findings, the most concerning statistic that came out of this study is that 1 in 10 women who take the abortion pill experience what's called serious complications. And there's a list of what those are. And I'll tell you a couple of them. The biggest ones are hemorrhaging, infection, and sepsis. And so that rate, 1 in 10 women, is dramatically higher than what the FDA has disclosed to the public, because the chemical abortion drug regimen is somehow FDA approved. And the FDA has disclosed a much lower complication rate during its approval process than what's actually on the FDA's label. So that means that this study shows that the real-world complication rate for mifepristone prescribed abortions stands at 10.93%, and that's almost precisely 22 times higher than what the FDA reported figure is in their approved trials, which is, they say it's less than 0.5%. I mean, that is over a 9.5% difference, which maybe to the average person sounds kind of minuscule. In the scientific world, that is a dramatic difference. So the study further found over 5% of the women had to undergo a repeat abortion attempt after taking the drug regimen within 45 days of taking mifepristone. So that indicates that the first dose of mifepristone that's supposed to tragically fully kill and expel the fetus failed. They have to undergo the surgical procedure anyway. And again, the FDA cited these clinical trials in their original approval process, saying it's less than 0.5% of women suffered what they called serious adverse reactions to mifepristone. But as this study, which is much broader than any of the FDA's clinical trials, show, the rate is much higher. So that's where we stand from EPPC, and it's very concerning. So Grace, just having heard all that, I'm really interested in your perspective on this, particularly as a woman. I would just want to know what you think when you hear all those numbers.
Yeah, I think for me, really, abortion has never been about women and isn't about women. And this study just further confirms that and actually, just exemplifies that. I mean, even what you were saying about the difference between like 0.5%, that's like 1 in 200 women experiencing a complication compared to 1 in 10. That is a huge difference in terms of how many women are actually experiencing complications from this. And I think on a much broader scale, we do such a disservice to women and women's health anyway, with different things like birth control concepts and things where women are experiencing really horrible effects and no one is talking about this. And so I think this is extremely important and is hopefully a wake-up call that we actually need to address this, that so-called women's health is really not about women at all.
Yeah, I agree, I had a similar reaction from a policy perspective, which is, you're right, this issue is supposed to be about women and women's health. And when the government gets involved, Grace, my feeling is that governments only exist for a small amount of reasons. But one of those reasons, if not the main reason, is to make sure its citizens are protected. The collective power of everybody through the government is supposed to protect its citizens, particularly its most vulnerable, which are mothers. And this shows that the FDA appears by making, through a process that we're going to talk about, to have intentionally over 2 decades endangered the mothers of America, as they deregulated this pill to make it more accessible. So that's what's shocking to me. I do want to, because I know our audience really cares about this. So just a little bit of further backstory to the chemical abortion pill regimen. A few months before Roe versus Wade was overturned, we all remember those days leading up to the release of the Supreme Court's opinion in the case Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health. Famously, that opinion was leaked to the media before it even came out. Well, it seems like some people saw the writing on the walls, particularly at the FDA, because a few months before that happened, the FDA scrapped the requirement that women must obtain abortion pills in person from a healthcare provider, and allowed them to obtain it through the mail. There are some drugs that are really modest drugs, or not super dangerous, and you can get those through the mail as a prescription. And there are other drugs that are much more heavily guarded because they're more dangerous. There are usually requirements like an in-person examination. You have to physically drive and pick them up yourself to be issued them. These were some of the basic safeguards that were put around the abortion pill because, as these numbers show, it's quite dangerous. Well, the FDA seems like they saw the writing on the walls that the overturn of Roe versus Wade was about to invalidate protections for abortion access in about half the states. And they realized that we need to make this more available to women in America. And so they scrapped that requirement of an in-person pickup of the prescription and allowed women to just get these things through the mail. But that was just the latest example in a 20-year campaign by the FDA, which, by the way, spanned multiple presidential administrations. This is one of the dangers of the deep state, is that these lifelong federal employees at big agencies like the FDA can stay in their jobs because it's very hard to fire them, and they can outlast presidents of both parties. And over the course of 2 decades, most of our growing up, Grace, they have deregulated this drug and made it easier for women to get it, and it's clearly dangerous. So that's the backstory here, and I just think that's really it says a lot about the need for reform in our government, but also in just how we think about the abortion issue in a post-Roe v. Wade world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, if you're listening to this and you're a parent, you're thinking about the future, even a grandparent, the whole concept of chemical abortion makes abortion so much more accessible that it is so easy for young girls to access this. And, thinking about the future, obviously, I'm sure you're bringing up your children to be very pro-life, but even in the church, even in very Christian circles, there are so many girls who get caught up in the deceptiveness of abortion as a solution to their problem. And this has just expanded the ease of access that they have to that. And it's so sad because the abortion industry is really capitalizing on women's vulnerability. And another side of this is it's actually aiding abusers, because when a girl doesn't have to go in for an abortion, an abuser can just order these pills and force her to take them. And this is happening. And to me, again, that is so anti-women's health. It's so anti actually caring for women. And then when we even think about just all the complications that come from this, like what if that young woman being at home and managing your own abortion at home, one is abortion should not even be a thing, obviously, but two, like that should not, this is like a major, major, major medical procedure, which is extremely unnatural. God did not design us to have babies ripped out of our bodies or forced out of our bodies. So when you're undergoing that, it's one thing with medical supervision, which is all still wrong and very dangerous. But when you're also undergoing that completely by yourself, that is so anti any concept of care. And it really just shows the heart of the abortion industry is money at the end of the day, and is just expanding their services and is really anti children and anti-women. And so I think just considering that, that is a reason why every single one of us needs to be involved in the fight, even if you're never going to consider abortion yourself, or your wife isn't if you're a guy listening to this, but like thinking further down the line, I am not a parent yet, but I do not want my kids to grow up in a world where abortion is all too easy. Not that I pray they would ever choose that, but that's just such a wrong concept of the world. And as Christians, we have a duty to do something about this as well. So I think that this study is it's just another wake-up call, and we have to respond to this.
Yeah, that's well said, Grace. I want to give us two more data points about some surrounding controversies over this just before we go to a break, and I'll be brief. So it's worth noting that as you could probably tell from some of the background information we gave, that the abortion movement really saw the chemical abortion drug regimen being sent through the mail as the future of abortion access for women in a post-Roe world, because a lot of more pro-life states, immediately upon the overturn of Roe versus Wade, some laws called trigger laws kicked in and prohibited abortion almost entirely in that states, both chemical and surgical. But the thing about an abortion drug is that it can be sent through the mail, even to those states. So the abortion movement is very strategic. It always has been. And it thought ahead and knew that this is going to be, in their minds, the only way for women to access abortion in some of those more restrictive states is we can send it to them through the mail. Well, that is now being tested. It is now testing the bonds of our union, because there's such a thing as interstate commerce, where someone in New York can mail something to someone in Texas. And there's active litigation going on over this. I'll keep my details about this pretty vague, just for the sake of our audience, but they can look it up pretty easily. There's multiple cases from, I believe, Texas and Louisiana, where people in those states are suing an abortionist doctor in the state of New York for mailing abortion drugs through the mail to patients in those states of Texas and Louisiana. And the court system in New York is not complying. They were not going to extradite that doctor. So that litigation is ongoing. We don't know how it's going to work out, but this is a real test of the fabric of the union. This is a test of state cooperation. Historically, constitutionally, states have supported each other in their laws and facilitated them enforcing it. This is a striking example of where that's not happening anymore. And I do think some higher courts are going to have to weigh in. So I want our audience to know about that. I also want them to know that because at FPAF, we believe Americans deserve better than this from their government, this endangering and making drugs more accessible. As part of our After Roe campaign, our CEO, Craig DeRoche, signed our organization onto a letter sent to President Trump alongside over 50 other pro-life organizations, urging immediate action to address the dangers of mifepristone. And the letter, among other things, calls for the president to support state pro-life laws, to reconsider the FDA's approval of mifepristone altogether, and at a minimum to reinstate the original safety protocols established 20 years ago that protected women from this drug. So that's what FPAF is doing. We can link to that article. We will link to that letter, in our show description for our audience to peruse. And I think now we'll take a break. We'll be back in a moment.
We believe you were born for such a time as this. Our ministry exists to empower you to understand your identity in Christ, discover your gifts and calling through intentional discipleship, and to launch you out as a leader in your community. We're not just here to talk about faith, we're here to live it out. That means engaging culture, that means leading with truth. And yes, that means stepping into spaces that shape our world, including government. Whether you're an artist, an entrepreneur, a teacher, a nurse, or anything in between, government affects your life. Policies and laws shape the culture you work in, the freedoms you have, and the values that get promoted. That's why it's not enough to sit on the sidelines. We need young Christians running for office, serving on school boards, working in public policy, and voting with a biblical worldview. We need you to care. Because as Proverbs 29:2 says, when godly people lead, the people rejoice. This generation has the passion, the voice, the boldness. Now it's time to match that with truth, discipleship, and purpose. So here's the call. Pray, vote, engage. Be disciples, be leaders. Let's raise up next-gen leaders who carry Christ into culture and shape the future of our nation, starting with you. Join the movement of 1630 and lead the change.
Altogether, roughly 1 in 7 women who are prescribed a mifepristone abortion experiences a severe adverse event or undergoes a repeat abortion attempt afterwards due to the failure of this mifepristone abortion regimen. In light of these findings, the FDA should immediately reinstate its earlier, stronger patient safety protocols to ensure physician responsibility for women who take mifepristone under their care, as well as mandate full reporting of its side effects. The FDA should further investigate the harm this drug causes to women and, based on objective safety and effectiveness criteria, reconsider its approval altogether. Women deserve to know the truth. Women deserve better than the abortion pill. This is a quote from the conclusion of the study. And I think that really sums up a lot of this, especially the last two lines. Apparently, abortion is supposed to be pro-choice, so you're supposed to be informed of what that choice is. And this goes directly against that because women are not being informed of the potential harmful side effects that could follow on from that. And also, I love what it says about women deserve better than the abortion pill. I think that comes back to what you said at the beginning, Joseph. Our government is supposed to protect us and empower us. This is harming women. They should be stopping this. Women do not need abortion pills. Women deserve better than the abortion pill. So, Joseph, I would love some of your further thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I would have to agree with it. And I think even more fundamentally, yes, women deserve better than this from their government. They also deserve better than this from everyone around them. And speaking as a man, I think they deserve it particularly from men. Men exist to protect women from dangerous drugs like this. But going further up the chain of events, they deserve men that protect them from facing the vulnerability and the fear of an unplanned pregnancy. They deserve protection from men who are not willing to endanger them by making sure they're not going to have sexual relations with them if they're not ready to raise the child together. Men need to lead on this and take responsibility for it so that the women that they're called to protect are not endangered by these drugs. So, but Grace, you brought up just in the course of reading that quote, I think you hear inherent in them is a response to a lot of the traditional pro-choice arguments, which I do think is a false binary. It puts the notion of choice further down again the causal chain, whereas the choice for whether to have a child doesn't begin after you're pregnant; it begins before you have sex. And I do want us to address some of these real counter arguments specifically to the chemical abortion drug, though. So maybe I'll go through these and then give you a chance to respond first. We hear these a lot, and I want to give them good credence because we want to equip pro-life advocates that are listening to be able to respond to these. So this is some of the counter arguments we've heard. We've heard people say the chemical abortion regimen of mifepristone and misoprostol is FDA approved and is therefore safe and effective. We can put aside what effective might mean for now. We can get back to that later. In a world without Roe versus Wade, women supposedly need uninhibited access in order to achieve true equality between the sexes, to pursue their dreams, and to explore their sexuality without consequence. Access to abortion care is a fundamental human right, and chemical abortion is the safest and easiest way for women to exercise it in a post-Roe world. So, Grace, you're a woman. I know you haven't had kids yet, but I know the prospect is there. I know you want to someday. So just tell us, as a woman with the potential for childbearing, what are some of your responses to those ethos that anyone who's involved in the pro-life movement has heard before?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, first of all, one of the arguments of it being FDA approved, I think what's interesting is as a European, we have so many additives in food that are like illegal in Europe because they're pretty bad for you. And then they're just like normal part of food over here in the US, which is FDA approved. And so FDA approved does not mean safe, does not mean healthy. And I mean, also, I think, even when we look at different things like birth control and even coming back to food additives, a lot of those things seem to have worse consequences on women. And even personally, when I came to the US and I started eating US food, it kind of messed my body up for a while. And I had to not eat certain things just because I suppose my body is used to European food, not American food. But it's interesting, and my sister and my mom had a similar experience, not quite as bad as me, but my dad and brother are fine. And it's really interesting how things kind of seem to affect women worse. But also on the side of just being a woman, wanting children one day, I think there's so much misinformation around birth control, around abortion pills, around abortion in general, and all this conversation, which is leading even to infertility, horrible adverse side effects, which these women maybe actually did want kids someday, got caught up in false this false doctrine is a strong word to say, but all the false promises of the abortion lobby that this is safe, this is effective, like this is easy, this is nothing, and then they experience such horrible adverse side effects. And from a mental health standpoint too, that's really, really hard. I mean, even as girls, like I'm sure any woman listening to this podcast would be able to relate to this. Like sometimes when it's near your time of the month, your hormones are going a little crazy and you just want to cry your eyes out or something like that. It's so weird. And like, I can't imagine the mental stress that must come on a far, far, far worse level when your hormones are just being wrecked by this drug that your body was never, ever created to take. And now you have the realization that you killed your baby, which for many women as well, when they're told, oh, this pill isn't, about killing your baby or anything, it's just about getting rid of the fetus. And then if they're doing it at home, and this is really a horrible picture, but if they see their baby in the toilet, the mental effect that must have on you, especially because as women, we're created with maternal instincts. All of your maternal instincts are going to rise in that moment and you can't do anything about it. Like that is just horrible. And so we think about that, and then we think about also just a lot of birth control, a lot of things that a lot of chemicals women are putting in their bodies are actually really screwing us up. And I know there's different conservative voices speaking out on these things, but it's just like all these different things is just such a lack of care for women. And so I think those would be some responses. And lastly, I would also say that it is such a lie that to be equal with men, we need sex without consequence. I really, really appreciated what you said, Joseph, about men need to take the lead and not abandon women to these vulnerable positions, because there is an element of truth in that, sexual relations, the woman is the one who is going to end up carrying a life in her, not the man from that. So in that sense, yes, there is potentially more of a consequence for her. But really, the problem is not that. The problem is how we view the entire concept of that. That sex is supposed to be something done within a committed marital relationship where both parties are bearing equal responsibility for the results of that. And the man actually potentially can bear more responsibility because he's the one who steps up to provide and make sure that that child and the woman is cared for, especially if she's going through pregnancy and needs to take some time off work. I mean, she's growing a baby, So I think really that argument is an argument that is coming from a very, very broken standpoint. We here at FPF, this is obviously our whole mission, is to bring back family values. And because they've been lost, we now see all this destruction. But that's completely is never part of the plan, So I think those would be some of my thoughts. And as a woman, I do not feel like I'm having my sexual rights, or whatever that would be termed, taken away by not having access to abortion. No, that's not what it's about at all.
I'm so grateful for your perspective, Grace. Really, it's a really valuable one. And first of all, I want to affirm you that every time I have gone and visited your country in England and eaten the food there, I have always felt better. So you are absolutely right about their food processing standards. The European Union, UK government, they have a lot of problems, but when it comes to food processing, For anyone who's not been there, I can testify you will feel a lot better eating the food there. But to get back to your perspective, Grace, I completely agree with you. I think this, like you said, this place of brokenness that these arguments come from is a place, brokenness usually, if you don't know Jesus, it leads to cynicism. And I think this is really a cynical thing to say that the only way that men and women can be made equal is so that women can also have sex without consequences like men. Not only is that cynical, but I think the true, accurate feminist perspective on that is that it's still male-centric. You're saying that men define what it means to be fully at liberty, and that you reduce that to their ability to have sex without consequences. I think when it comes to human reproduction, Grace, that makes men inferior to women because we don't have that superpower. I mean, it is a superpower to grow another human being, a unique human life made in the image of God, inside you for 9 months to nurture them with just your body alone. And the way the mother's body and the baby's body are connected is really just jaw-dropping and incredible if you've ever observed it. And so I think that's why I think this notion of equality should be about dignity and value, not about capabilities. So we believe as Christians at FPAF that men and women are both made in the image of God, and therefore equally valuable and equally worthy of dignity before him, which is why Christ died on the cross for both of them. But they're not equal in their capabilities. There are some things men can do that women can't, generally speaking, but there is at least one thing that women can do that men cannot do. No matter what certain cultural voices say in our world in today's day and age, men cannot get pregnant. They cannot bear children. They never will be able to. And I think that's why there's this ultimate responsibility on men to where when you desire a woman and you want to be romantically involved with her, there is a cost to that for both of you. There's a vulnerability for both of you, but more so for the woman because of what she's capable of, both physically and emotionally. You mentioned the maternal instinct, Grace. I have to recommend to our audience, testimonies about this, the effects of this pill and this regimen are so valuable. I think pointedly of the beautiful but awful movie Unplanned, which is about the story of Abby Johnson, a former Planned Parenthood director who eventually left Planned Parenthood, and now through her ministry she helps other abortion workers leave. And there's a scene where she is prescribed the abortion pill regimen and she expels one of her babies in her home. It is an awful scene, but it displays this all in a really compelling manner because the abortion industry will tell you you'll just have a heavy period when you take this drug and that'll be it, and you won't be pregnant anymore. And not only is that unbelievably degrading to both the mother and the baby, but it's a lie. Because every woman who takes this drug knows they will go through what Abby is portrayed as having going through in that film. And I think that has been, those testimonies are really powerful, at least from a man's perspective, Grace. Like as a man, I don't think you really get this about women until you hear one of them talked about it, or unfortunately you have to see it portrayed. So I just want to affirm your perspectives there and want to challenge men listening that this is as much on you as it is about on women, especially because at the end of the day, half of all babies that are born are men. So there's no way we can justify this as simply being a women's issue. The whole no uterus, no opinion thing, I thoroughly reject that. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I don't say because you don't have, you never held a rank doesn't mean you don't have opinion about veterans affairs. So, and this is and veterans affairs, as important as they are, much more trivial to the matter of human reproduction. So those are really my thoughts about it, Grace. Have we missed anything in these arguments, you think?
Yeah, I would just like to say that also, I think, unfortunately, the whole idea of abortion and the abortion pill sees motherhood as a disease. And it's telling women that, it's actually very de-empowering because it's telling us that, okay, no, in certain scenarios in life, you're not strong enough to be a mom. And so let's get rid of this thing that's going to hinder you, that's going to take away your identity and your dreams. Personally, for me, I grew up with I am naturally more achievement driven. And so I bought into some of that boss woman kind of culture, which meant that I pitched a lot of my identity related to my achievements and my performance. And so then if you told me even growing up, it was not the top of my list to get married and be a mom, I'm like so sad to say that because that's literally the top of my list now. And it just makes me like emotional if I really think about it. But I think that something that I realized was like, Grace is not the boss woman. Like, that's not who I am. Grace is the unique person that God made me to be, who is full of love and happiness and joy and whatever gifts God has given me and how he's created me. That's who I am. Whatever I do in my life is an outpouring of who I am. What I do is not who I am. And I think for many women, we've been fed such a false narrative because it also comes back to this equality with men idea of like, to be equal with men, you need to be able to like have all these career opportunities. I'm all for that. I'm all for living your life and going after things, but I do not think that makes you equal with men in any way. I think that and I also do think that men are naturally more like workers, and women, when you actually kind of like accept that about yourself, we are more built to be nurturers. And I think that it really feeds into this bigger lie that like motherhood isn't a good thing, or some of us are just not made to be moms. We have like 50% of young American women don't want to be moms right now. We have to ask ourselves, like, why is that? And so as we are actually raising a voice about this, for me, part of that voice is also an encouragement that motherhood is beautiful. Motherhood is not a disease. That whatever, even if you do find yourself in a difficult scenario, you were literally created to be a mom. You have those maternal instincts inside of you, even if they're buried a little deep, even if they're underneath fear and maybe past negative experiences. Like, this is actually a beautiful thing. Do not let the abortion side tell you that this is something horrible and it's slavery. And so that was just something I wanted to close on, that actually, as you said, Joseph, too, like, when we look at it for what it is, like, we have an amazing gift as women to be able to have that opportunity to bond with that child in that way, and then be able to nurture them in a way that the father can't. And when you look at it like that, it's like, wow, I'm super blessed to get that opportunity instead of seeing it as a negative.
Yeah, that's well said, and it's that cynicism again that that tells women, really tells everybody, because a lot of men don't want to be parents anymore either. But that's been more consistent throughout the ages, as men have usually needed the consequences that come from sex to tie them down, whereas women, it's more recent for them to be told, as part of what I would argue is second and third wave feminism, that you can't have it all. You can't have a thriving family with kids and a successful career, or you can't be a strong woman and be a mother. I mean, it's deeply cynical and reductive. Really, it restricts people and women to what they are capable of. And that's why I think I like this note to end us on, Grace, because we've hopefully tried to present to our audience an optimistic picture. You don't have to accept that lie. You can have it all. And I'll just leave for people that do feel themselves daunted by the prospect of children, or maybe care about these issues but aren't really sure about whether they want to have it or not. That's okay. Everything Grace and I have said has been spoken at a general level, and we stand by it. But for those who may be unsure, maybe you're in that camp, that's okay. And I think like Grace said, maybe your instincts are buried, or maybe they're not. What we've spoken about is generalizations and everything. Those generalizations, these ideologies, affect you no matter what your desires are, which is why we think you should care about them, and why, at the end of the day, you should expect better from your government. So, Grace, I'm thankful for your perspective. I think we're going to sign off here. So I just want to thank our audience for staying with us through this conversation. We're going to link to the study itself and the letter I mentioned in our show notes below. Thank you for listening to this episode of our show, House to Home, which again is a podcast of Family Policy Alliance Foundation. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button. Follow us to get the latest episode in your podcast feed every week. And if you like the show, if you like the content and this news and analysis that you've gotten from Grace and I, you can get more of this by following FPAF on social media. Most of our handles are at family_policy, which we'll also link to in the show notes. So I've been Joseph Kohm alongside Grace Youngson as always. We look forward to seeing you all again next week.